social enterprises or social business for the social causes. And the model of this social business type is no loss, no dividend. So nobody can take the dividend. And the other social business that should be, owned by the poor people, which is the model of Grameen Bank. So they will be the owner. Theoretically, they will be the owner of the Grameen Bank, and they will use it for the benefit and the social benefit as well. The third model that we have identified is a model that's interesting with the collaboration of development organization named CARE International and with the MNC multinational corporation like Bata. They have joint venture program, and also now they are involved with other organizations like Unilever and also the Square Bangladesh. So the main objectives is to create employment for the rural women, and basically the rural women, they sell the product of different multinational corporation, and the name of the project is Jita, so they get some kind of commission on the basis of their sale. And there are other kind of, social enterprises like West Concern and Kaji model. Basically, they have this kind of one kind of social and environmental aim. Like West Concern, they just recycle the waste of the city, especially in Dhaka and many other part of the Bangladesh. And the most popular one is, the microfinance business, especially popular by the Grameen Bank and the BRAC, and there are many NGOs who have this kind of microfinance program. It is said that almost all NGO in Bangladesh, they have the microfinance business, not only for the poor people, but the sustainability of their own organization as well. And also there are some kind of, conventional handicrafts products who also somehow benefits the rural people. So these are the main models of different social enterprises in Bangladesh. And although there are differences among their models, but most of them, they have this kind of, objectives like that to income generate, one kind of income generation, and also, help the local people, the poor people, and they have this kind of health program, education, and many others program with their, vision. Characteristics of the types, there are, if we look at majority, most of the SE, they are registered as non-profitable organization, as the key speaker, he told in the case of Korea. Majority are single organization and a single ownership. And the NGOs, there are two types of NGOs. Indeed, we don't have that middle, type of, or mid-section, NGOs. Either the NGOs, they have higher capital, they have lots of capital, and or absence of capital. So small and the big one. And the main objectives of this SE are poverty alleviation, employment creation, livelihood improvement, and creation of income opportunity for women. Many have the goal to empowering the woman. Besides, they have some additional program, improving health, sanitation, hygiene, and other objectives. And also 10%, if you look at the characteristics of the SEs, 10% SEs started with the capital up to US $6,250, 31% with more than US $6,250, and 5% started up to 12,500. And only 3% they started with a capital more than 12,500. I should say that when we ask about their capital, about the taxes or revenue, nobody wants to, tell that, because, there are lots of problem and complexities within the government, and also the corruption, that exists in South Asia, and I think in Southeast Asia. So they always try to, avoid these questions. But at least we could find out from different sources that they have. And initially the capital they use for the SE, basically personal investment of the owner. Mostly they invested themselves. They also got some kind of grants from development organization or social investors. Also public grant. There were public grant, loan, and institutional fund, and equity from the investor, which is 2%. And if you look at the their resources, I mean, we ask the organizations whether they consider themselves as matured or not. Very few say that they are matured enough, you know, in terms of their capital, in terms of their resource, in terms of revenue, and also the structure of the organization and their activities. Like only 42% we CEO are women, and rest 58% are male. And if we look at the structure, most of the people, they say that there is no poor people, you know, in their governing body. Some told us that poor people, they don't understand. They can't say what's the problem and what's the issue they should address. Only 15% they said that there are poor, you know, people in their governing body, and there are some women, especially the rural women, who are also involved with this governing body, like Grameen Bank. They have a huge number of women in their board. Good, back to that. And if we look revenue for the first, we ask them revenue within the last 5 years, 70%, and I think it's a percentage all about. You can see that how much revenue they paid, and also in 213. I mean, we had some sort of political unrest. So, I mean, they couldn't, you know, tell us about the 2013. What they do, what kind of social activities, I mean, they have. So they have this kind of, you know, social innovations, like basically skill development through training, different kind of training, and then income generating activities, opportunity. And also making use of traditional craft skill to produce more modern goods. Like we found one organization who are promoting the indigenous people. So somehow, you know, they are giving training them to, you know, how they can transform that indigenous things to the modern things. And also there are some, what are the design, what should be the design. So they give this kind of training to the poor people. And also there are microcredit programs, and definitely it is the most largest, you know, SE in Bangladesh. And also they give training on healthcare, water sanitation activities, and urban waste management, rural sales distributions, and so many things. Most innovative that I said already, that the microcredit business, and their innovation range from cost saving to management, and also the development of the, you know, of the rural poor people. Mostly the segment of the poor people, they are serving for the poor people. If you look at the data, serving for the enterprising poor mostly, like 53%, agricultural workers 33%, farmers 18%, indigenous people 20%. It's huge, because I mean, if we consider in generally, I mean, maybe among the 60 you know, social enterprises that we interviewed, somehow they are focusing on the indigenous people. But considering, I mean, in the scenario of the country, it's very high rate, like 20% indigenous people. Definitely, it's rarely higher. And also some are also working with the disability and disabled people. And also, interestingly, some people, some organizations, they focus on women, some also the rural poor, some, you know, focus on the disabled people, and some also destitute, and also the sex worker. So they try to, you know, help them. And another thing is that, I mean, I should say that the supply and the workers, who are the supply and the workers, it's very, I mean, it's not easy to, you know, distinguish, because sometimes the workers are the suppliers and also the suppliers of the workers, and there are more people behind the scenario. So we don't know how many people are, you know, incorporated with the whole program, because it's like a chain. So suppliers and the workers, then somebody, you know, gives something to do with the other workers. So it's a huge things. So it's a large chain, you know. Then go there. Interestingly, no SE, they sell capacity building. I mean, we haven't found anyone who sell the capacity building. Rather, with the support of the other organization or the mostly NGO-related program, they, you know, paying for the capacity building of the poor people and especially the women. They give the training, so there is no, you know, capacity building program for sale of this institute. And most than 42% of the SE, they dedicated product or service for the women inclusively. Impact majority as well, impact, if we look at the impact of the SE, definitely they are creating some kind of income opportunity for the women, rural people, especially the women, especially who are considered as as the capability deprivation. So somehow giving this kind of, you know, offering some kind of income generating activities, they are trying to, you know, help those women who are deprived already by the society because of the patriarchy, because of the social norms and values. And also the C claim that workers acquire higher self-esteem and also greater confidence because of this kind of program. Many workers have been able to send their children to the school, improving their living condition, and also the house, again, you know, going outside. So mobility is some sort of the symbol of the status as well, and at the same time it is also considered by the development organization as a constraint of the women's empowerment. So it's more complex. We have to understand where they go, and what's the purpose of going out. So all are related with this mobility concept. And also women have been able to raise their voice, especially in the organization, especially in different areas. When they face any problem or challenges, they can at least raise their voice. And also as I say, that some poor people, they have been able to participate in the governing body, although we don't know. I mean, again, it is questionable that what they do. I mean, in Grameen Bank, there are lots of women in the governing body, but we usually see that nobody, you know, raise their voice in front of the higher officials. I mean, they're just, you know, sitting and giving their support to the you know, the high officials. So these are the impact that we have seen among the rural people and especially the empowerment of women. But as I said, there are lots of challenges that the SED are facing. One of the most challenge that they are facing is access to financial, sector, because the financial support, without the financial support, especially, we have seen that the interest is very high, especially in the bank system, and also they are facing some problem with the management. Access to appropriate technology is also another problem, and also effective and efficient management. Lack of effective and efficient management is also another problem. The most important problem is corruption in different layers of the government, regulatory boards, and also the negative government policy. And also weather, as you know, that Bangladesh is also known for the disaster-prone area. So weather is also sometimes make some problem, especially those organizations who are working with the agro and the local raw material based. So that is another problem. And also another important problem is that the political unrest that we have. I think that it's not only the Bangladesh. Whenever the election comes, the government, new government formed, then the other opposite party, they started, doing some sort of things that that makes the country unstable. So political unrest, and especially all the CEO, they told us, especially 2012, 2013 in Bangladesh, the political unrest was severe. So I mean, they faced a challenge because they have some kind of shipment, and especially those who work with the other organization or globally. So they have faced they face this kind of problem. So that's all in a short presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We can open it up to maybe about 10 minutes.
But why is it there's no business for capacity? Because there is a...
Okay, shall I answer now?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. Okay. Capacity building, as I told, that still now, most of the organization, not only the general or common people, rather the organization, they themselves don't know they are doing some sort of social business, and conceptually still they are unclear. And capacity building, it's also related as the development model and the development activities that started in Bangladesh with NGOs. So always NGO says that you have to build your capacity, especially the rural people. So it's always the part of the NGO activities. So whenever we talk about the capacity building, it seems that the NGO they will, or the SE they will give it free, not as a business. So we don't have this kind of capacity building, but I think that some organization, they are thinking about how they can sell the capacity building, but still now it's absent, especially among the 60 SE that we interviewed. But even we found some, I mean very few, like 1 or 2 who are not included in this sample. But still now, we always say capacity building, it's a part of the development organization, and it will be given, on the basis without any charge. So whenever you become the member of this organization, they will automatically give you this kind of capacity building.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to ask the opinion about the differentiation between the NGO doing library activity and the social enterprise.
I said there are 4 models. There are different kind of models of SE, and basically still now most of the social business program are related to the NGOs. So I haven't seen any, very few organizations who are doing only the social business without their entity with the NGOs, mostly run with the social business, still now dominated by the NGOs in Bangladesh.
That was actually very similar to my question, because you laid out the different business models. Sorry, Allison, from Shoedog. You laid out the different SE models, and I was interested, do you see the hybrid model starting to take off and social business becoming a smaller proportion of the SEs in Bangladesh? Or are you, and quite frankly, are you seeing that profitable businesses with a social and environmental aim starting to increase and really compete with the social businesses in the hybrid models?
I don't think that they are competing with each other. Like BRAC, who has the hybrid model. We always say, or somebody mentioned this as a hybrid model. It's a huge NGO. They are not only working in Bangladesh,
the biggest NGO in the world.
So yes, the largest, biggest NGOs in the world. Yes. So they don't think that they are competing with the Western and the small organization who have just started, working with the recycling, the waste things. I don't think that they are competing with each other, but maybe the different organizations, whether they are NGOs or not, as social business or social enterprises has become a prominent issue right now. Like 2 decades ago, 1 decade ago, nobody knows about that much. I shouldn't say not nobody, but most of the people, especially in case of Bangladesh, I think they don't know about this kind of social business. So some organizations, they are trying to innovate some new things as for the social business. So I don't say that there are competition. Rather, I should say that they are complementing each other and interrelated with each other. And in one sense, it's better because in 80s and 90s, everybody were involved with the microfinance. Although in their mission and vision, they said that they are trying to empower the rural people and especially the women. So they were working for the empowerment of the rural women. But suddenly we saw that 80% organization even bragged they didn't have this kind of huge microfinance business. Only the Grameen Bank, they have this kind of, they started with the microfinance business. Certainly all those organizations in the NGO sectors like ASHA, BRAC, and many, Proshika, many others, prominent bank, they shifted from awareness building and somehow they were left oriented different kind of, different kind of NGOs that they work in Bangladesh who were anti-liberalism and also the anti-capitalism. They started shifting from the other side to this side. So all of them, like they're jumping into the organization and started, microfinance business. So in that sense, even when I did my field work, I have found that among the 13 organizations working in the same village, 12 they had this kind of microfinance business, and that is also one kind of challenge is that overlapping. Everybody is the member, every poor woman they are the member of Grameen Bank, at the same time ASHA, at the same time BRAC, and they know, and also the management they know, but they have this kind of target, that you have to fulfill the target. So they didn't mind to include all these things, given that their ideology was different. So if the other organization, they shift from the microfinance to an innovative, they started, some sort of innovative model, I think it would, support the whole country and also the, support the social business, to increase in Bangladesh, who wants to, reduce the poverty as well as the women's empowerment. So I think it's a complementary, supportive, and definitely I do support this kind of new innovation, by the new social SE.
So my name is Nurul Amin. I'm working for Oxfam Regional Office as Regional Enterprise Lead. So I'm also from Bangladesh. So thank you so much for giving the very excellent and insightful presentation. So I think one model is maybe missing. One is the cooperative model. So those are working in the very rural area. These are the very small enterprise. So they are working for social business, for well-being for the poor people. I think there might be missing in the study. So that's the one area. I think and another thing is a gender segregation data. So we are very good. We are finding very good data, but in terms of women participation at the different level of the enterprises, so that would be helpful for us, so that we can think about. So if we think about the future strategy for social enterprises, so what would be role of Oxfam or other organizations to engage women at the different level of the enterprises, and how they can contribute, for the social enterprises. And third thing is, based on my experience, I found small enterprises working in the rural area, especially women also working in the as a social entrepreneur, but there is a lack of recognitions.
Yes.
So that's another point. So I think these are three things very important, maybe missing in that.
Thank you very much for pointing out about that, especially the cooperative. I mean, it's a small presentation because only the 15 minutes, so I was just, thinking what should I say and what shouldn't. Cooperative model, yes, as I said you, that the first SE model in Bangladesh, or not only in Bangladesh, I think that Indian subcontinent
Yes.
was definitely the cooperative model. We looked for the cooperative model, but somehow we haven't found that much. Like earlier there was Milpita and lots of cooperative models in Bangladesh. But now they are shifting. They don't, belong in this cooperative model. And somehow the cooperative model, I don't know why, but somehow they are missing, and we don't see that much cooperative like earlier. So that's why we just, pointed out the major types of models. But in our report, yes, definitely we mentioned about the cooperative model. And also gender segregation, yes, there are lots of data, especially on how many women they are, involved with the whole process. Yes, we have the data in our report, but especially if we look at the SEs, still now they are somehow, focusing on the issues like handicrafts and, lots of things which is basically run by the women. So to some extent, we can say 90% women are involved with the SE as the type and the nature of the activities of this organization. And also we found that there are very few, family members like men who are also involved in this, but they are not, doing this kind of handicrafts things. Rather, they are involved with the selling, and they work as a supplier. So that's why I told you that it's very complicated things, to identify the suppliers and also the workers. So workers definitely in this sector, almost all are women if they are, based in rural area. But if there are some small shops in Dhaka or in the city, definitely there are few men in this area. So we have this data. Yes, there are some small organization who is known, or we can tell them as social enterprise, especially the small, but they are still now unrecognized. Look, if we look at the big one, still now they don't consider that they are social enterprises. They just think, oh, we are NGO. When we ask them, well, look, what is your mission and which vision? What do you do? Then they started telling us, oh, we do this, which included in the definition of the social enterprise, and they become surprised and they are so happy that they are also doing this kind of activities. So I think still now we have lots of confusion regarding the social enterprises as well as social business concept. So as long as we can't clarify and make it clear to them, we can't even say who are social enterprises in Bangladesh. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay, one last question.
So of the 60 organizations, how many are fair trade organizations? How many are recognized fair trade organizations?
As far as I can remember, I think we have the data, but as far as I recall, there are 5 or 6. They are involved.
In the 60?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
Especially like even DO, they are DO, the organization,
Right.
DO
Like
Development.
quality works probably.
Yes, on Hate Bona, and also there are some organizations who are involved with this fair trade.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we now have Miss Victoria Fanggidae.
Actually, in the beginning, we were informed that it's 20-something slides, and then it's cut to 10. So you get some information being cut. I don't know how to squeeze them shorter than this. So this is the structure. I will talk about the context because this research happens in 4 countries. What Indonesian context is very quick, everything in one slide, like context, everything in one slide, and research, everything squeezed into one slide, and findings, few slides about maybe the price, the profile, etc. And then we will conclude in the conclusion section, one slide also. So the context of Indonesia as of this year, it's 11.3% poverty rate, but and mostly in rural areas. The poor people live in rural areas, and as in other emerging economies, most of the economies relies heavily on informal sectors. So I put 50% there, but you would believe that it's 90% actually, or 99%. And open employment is pretty low in statistics, but it's about 7.1 million, but underemployment and unpaid employment is getting higher. So we can check that out from the good figures there. And it's the SDI, Human Development Index. Indonesia is medium level country. We're in 108 and we've been there for over the last decade, I think. Gender Development Index, kind of in the middle, and low for the Gender Development Index. Gender inequality is pretty good, including the MDGs achievements. Goal 1 on poverty and hunger is mostly accomplished, but for the MDGs target. But if we compare these kind of indicators with the other peer economies, we're quite low compared to other BRICS or the new one, I don't know the acronyms recently, the Mexico and others countries like Turkey, etc. We're pretty low. And principally Indonesian foundation founders not favors but endorse cooperative as the main economic institution. So this is the policy context of Indonesian social enterprise actually. Whereas the economic institution suitable for Indonesia is cooperative because it has the family or societal values and not just for profit seeking. It's fundamental and it's in the constitution, in the preamble. So in the law, but the laws and regulations mainly regulate about MSMEs, that's micro, small, medium enterprises, communities and social organizations, non-profits, the law about foundations in 2001, and we have also other laws in 2008 about MSMEs, and a huge movement called Entrepreneurship movement, managed by over a dozen of ministries in Indonesia, and we have a lot of laws about cooperatives, laws and government regulations about zakat, that's Islamic alms, and etc. But there's no law specific about social entrepreneurs currently. And the history of social enterprises in Indonesia can be traced back to the colonial era. It's Muhammadiyah in the 1920s. Also some part I didn't mention here about the Christian missionaries from the Dutch government at the time. And then in a pretty modern area, Bina Swadaya, Pak Bambang is here. It's very honored to have Pak Bambang, who started Bina Swadaya in 1960s during Suharto's early regime, and most recently, like in 1990s, Dompet Duafa. Also, he will be a speaker in the second day, I think, of the conference. And most recently, many SEs with environmental concerns mushroom in urban areas like urban waste management or the waste banks, recycled crafting, etc. This is related with raising middle class in urban areas in Indonesia. And also most of NGOs based, there are a lot in urban and rural areas, but in urban areas we found that they are less commercial. And institutions and businesses related to Islamic economic concept, I think that's previous. Islamic concepts progress rapidly. Okay. After the context, the research, I don't put the objectives. We share same objective as Bangladesh research, also the 3 objectives you might have seen before. So mapping and everything, I can say I will copy from your presentation. And rapid appraisal, we have 2 mixed methods. So rapid appraisal is qualitative. We interviewed some prominent public figures in social enterprises. We have about 10 people interviewed. And also survey for the CEO of social enterprises and also the staff. So we have 59 social enterprises. Sampling is positive and snowballing because we found from the databases by the government agencies that a lot of them actually are not there, or they don't want to be interviewed, they don't give us consent, and then they give recommendation to others to refer. And that's why even we started in Greater Jakarta area in peri-urban, we stretched a bit to Bandung because some in Jakarta areas they didn't give consent for the survey. So, but the same caveats we need to notice here that not all SEs surveyed are SEPs as in the definition of a ISEA. But maybe if you follow the presentation this morning, we would rather call it preliminary SEPs or pre-SEPs. Organizations. That's what we found later. And then the numbers and other quantitative answers, I would say that might be compromised because of the custom. I think it's the same with the Bangladesh. And people are really not used to deal with figures. And some small SEs, they don't have written record of their financial, they don't have bookkeeping, and as well as limited access provided. Some big cooperatives and some MFIs, they don't provide access to their financial data. So these are some caveats in this research. And I just draw here some of the main findings from rapid appraisal. That most of the prominent figures that we interviewed saying that ISEA as a concept is relatively new because it's just emerged in the recent 5 years, initiated by NGOs, donors, charity, CSR. And some of them mostly started by individuals also with social concerns. And as in Bangladesh, they started and then they didn't realize that they could make profit out of it. So they started with just some of the interviews saying that we have the neighborhood full of poor people, the poor migrants from rural agricultural workers, they don't have jobs. So I started this thing, trainers, impact indicators prefer to be employed to measure impact if such a measurement will be conducted. Then the government will come to you and say that you're illegal anyway. So yeah, next. Some of the cited future internal and external challenges and facilitating factors for future growth. As I said before, a lot of them are still preliminary steps. So many still cited internal problem of organizations. They said that not enough committed and competent board capacity development and management of people. So internal management aspects still it's a big challenges. You can see all the committed, competent managers, development of second liners. If it comes 5 years and then you have to regenerate new leaders, and that they found it difficult to find dedicated people to do that. And that's external. It's for external challenges. It's interesting that a lot of them cited about the corruption. 11, 12 industry market practices negatively affecting SEs, and also lack of programs supporting social enterprise development. So they actually felt alone, and they have to fight, they have to struggle with the challenges. No one really invests in them, including, of course, government, as they see that government is the main actor, but they are quite left aside by the government. That's not to mention the corruption. And that's the external challenges. And scaling up is quite difficult because they say that it's hurdled by financial and production management. They want to scale up, they know that there are demands, some of the crafting and recycle paper, for instance, but they don't have enough capital and also not enough human resource for scaling up. Some of the conclusions here that I mentioned before: perceived impact, mainly economic and financial improvement, as the nature of the organization, mostly MFIs and cooperatives. Human resource management, that remains to be big challenges, and lack of specific programs that aiming at empowering women beyond their economic role. And also this aspect of gaining recognition, as said before, they say that they're like left alone, but recently, I think in the recent 5-10 years, the agencies like Asoka or British Council or some of the private banks, they started to make a lot of competitions for social enterprises. So people come from Timor, from Sulawesi, from Kalimantan, gathered in Jakarta, like 10, 20 nominations. They were given opportunities to have exhibition in the heart of Jakarta Convention Center, and then they're given the spots on the television or on the mass media, things like that, that try to gain the recognition for the existing SAs, the existing initiatives. And that's good, but it's, yeah. And government also, some of the government ministries try to do that. Support from government can be realized in terms of supportive policies, like access to capital, easier business permits, processing and provision, market opportunities and subsidies. It's very like that's what the respondents say. And yeah, as I said before, many of them, they are not SAPs yet. They're still preliminary or pre-SAPs, as they're not focused on creating sufficient wealth or distributing. They still struggle with the organization's development and how to make profits. So there should be kind of incentives through policy and program to assist this small scale to grow, and then for the big SEs to look for most effective ways to reach out to the poor. And there's some interesting in terms of in the context of Indonesia as the most populous Muslim countries, that Sharia-based financial institutions like BMT, it's a cooperative microfinance institutions, Sharia-based, so they have the section that manages alms and charity funds, but they have sections that make profits and investments and also produce things. So it's kind of the hybrid institutions as well that have, we can see that there's have dual values and big potentials to be developed. Also expanding market for ethical, which means ethically responsible in terms of environment and also social, and also Islamic related products, those accessories, fuels and things like that. These are opportunities in the future that can be addressed in many ways. This ethical business is mostly also, we reckon, because of the surveys being done in Jakarta. So middle class, raising number of middle class who have this awareness, developed awareness, they started to think about buying products that are not harmful to the environment, that are not harmful to other people. And this is a kind of opportunity that can be given to SE's development in the future. I think that's my presentation. Thank you.
Questions? Please.
I learned a lot from your two presentations, and I know that this is a research report, so there are a lot of conditions in order to have your finding like this. And because I learned that from at the beginning of our opening workshop, Dr. Lisa said that the expected result of our conference will be a result to advocacy to the Philippines government. So from this perspective, and I'm from SPERI, Vietnam, Social Policy Ecology Research Institute. So I'd like to share my 4 questions. So I think it's because you also have 8 months for research, and you will have a lot of things for research. But these are my 4 questions, just like suggested reference for your further studies, or you already have it in your research. But I in my opinion, I prefer to listen in order to make it more fruitful in terms of the advocacy. Okay, my first question is, what are the social problems that Bangladesh or Indonesia facing? Beside the context of your countries, you should analyze more in terms of the social enterprise perspectives. So what is the social problems facing your countries, and why these problems appear? You should be more analysis in terms of the social problems first. And the second question is, why the state or other sector, they don't have concrete solutions like the SEs to solve these problems facing your country now. And my third question is, how Bangladesh or Indonesia social enterprise did make their action plans or their social business plans to deal with these social problems. So the action plans here, I mean three kind of plans: activities plan, financial plans, and human resource plans. Because you did have very, very thick and deep interview with many social enterprise in your 2 countries. So we should make a list or more analysis in order to present out what did they do to solve the social problems. And my last question is, I learned a lot from your challenges here, but for myself it's too vague. It's not clearly enough in terms of the social enterprise perspective, because we should analyze and present why it is challenged in terms of social enterprise, because that is very, very popular challenges for all sectors in societies: finance, corruption, human resources, management. I think it's common challenges for any sectors in society, especially now. So I'd like to learn more about how is the challenges analysis in the build of the social enterprise. Yeah, so that is my comments. I would love to learn more from your research. Thank you.
Social problems of Indonesia. There's too many. I cannot mention. First, I think you can mention a lot. You can start from poverty, inequality. Definitely, it's raising inequality. Now our Gini ratio is 0.43, which is the highest since our independence day. So it's although our economic growth is pretty stable over the last, I think, even 2008, we survived the GEC, the global economic crisis, but inequality rise. So we have 100 million people live in Java Island alone, and then the other 100 something spread into other 16,000 islands. So it's a huge challenge of how to distribute the wealth and prosperity to all people, because it's different things. The poverty types in Java Island is different with Eastern Indonesia. Eastern Indonesia, they have small islands spread, so the government will find it difficult to build infrastructures. In Java Island, they have like too many people over very small size of area. So which one would you prioritize first? You want to reduce the poverty with the impact for 10 million people, but the severity of poverty is like this, or the severity of poverty is this, but outside, and it's huge investment that you have to buy. You have to build ports, you have to buy floating health centers instead of the one that based on lands. And it's, I think it's 10 times investment than the one that built in the land, unlike a continent with a spread. So that's, of course, this is not defending our government, not defending our government, but that's the challenges of poverty in Indonesia is very diverse in terms of concentration, in terms of inequality, in terms of infrastructure gaps between islands. And you have to add up cultural, ethnic, religions,
Yes.
on all of the 300 ethnic groups,
Make a difference between ethnic
6
and other.
state recognized religions, and hundreds other local religions. So it's not a homogeneous country, and you have to tackle different things in different way. Marginal groups. You can mention indigenous groups who have hundreds of them, and social problems. We can spend forever to talk about social problems in Indonesia, but as its perspectives, I think what our survey found out that this mostly started by individuals or NGOs, individuals, and we survey them in urban areas. So some individuals just have social concerns and they think like, we have some money, why don't we start this? And then it's because some of the interviews, they simply just because they saw that the neighborhood are poor, or some live near the leprosy center for rehabilitation for leprosy. And some of it's interesting, one of the case study, it's the rehabilitation center there mostly come from all over Indonesia. But these people, they are ashamed to come back, to return to their communities. They are ashamed to come back to Sulawesi, they are ashamed to come back to Kalimantan because they feel that they would not be accepted. So they live surrounding the rehabilitation center, no job, nothing to do, but depending on government assistance or charity of the neighborhoods. So some groups of youth started the empowerment for the ex-leprosy people. So they started to train them and to make accessories or clothing and so things like that. So I would say that the role of S is on the micro level, at the micro level, but the state is up here at the macro level. So how the state can reach down to micro level so that to what you can say, to scale up, to replicate, to scale up this small, connecting them, the dots, and then so make so that will make the impact more tangible. If we can talk in development effectiveness terminology, it's tangible impact. So that if you see small dots, 2, 3 dots, they don't mean anything. But if you connect hundreds of them or thousands of them, that's the role of the state, I think. So the state, I think, in the public figure of social enterprise that we interviewed, they said that this hybrid industry sort of established rather independent from the government. Yes, they are. They did establish independently, but the role of the state is, I think, in the next level, providing conducive environment in terms of policy environment. I was really surprised and really glad to hear the presentation this morning, the COSEA presentation. I think it's something that will be very good to be replicated in other countries. It's amazing how they started with certification, how they started with set up some standards. That's what are lacking in I think most of the emerging countries, India, Bangladesh, Indonesia.
Yes.
Even our informal sectors hasn't been gone anywhere since 10 years ago. There's no really effort to make them formal sectors so that you can also protect the workers with formal insurance, social security. And there's still like that. And that could be seen as a first step, how the government can step into this wild world of these small enterprises and intervene through their role as policymakers. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, James from Oxfam.
I'm sorry, it's just one question.
That's fine.
I just want to ask, in both countries, which type of social enterprise have you been looking at the moment, which you feel is having the greatest social impact today, and which type of social enterprise do you feel has the greatest potential to be bringing social impact, let's say in 5 years' time? And it may be the same type, or it may be that there's something which is emerging which you think has got greater potential in 5 years' time. Is that clear enough?
Yes.
So it's interesting to hear a little bit from both countries.
I have like 5 minutes. The impact first is about the impact that the EU perceived on the document. The document is very hard to find.
From both countries, which type of existing social enterprises from your
Creating bigger impact.
That has the biggest impact.
That's the hit
Yeah.
pass.
Based
For
on
the future, which type do you think?
I don't know. But I'm thinking.
I think for this research, it's microfinance mostly. So as my presentation said, mostly say economic, so income generation, income alternative sources of income. So they see waste there, they see papers, they see plastics, and they see that can be used by the poor people to find alternative impacts because most they are jobless. And
Yes,
Bangladesh,
the same
also
thing,
microfinance.
income generating and employment opportunity. Yes, mostly same. And some now, as I mentioned earlier, like Wisconsin, they are also focusing on that waste management and also the health issues. So there are some emerging social business, but still I think that 99% are focusing on the income generating activities as well as the sustained. Some organizations they are already sustained, and also somehow. Like BRAC and also Grameen Bank, and also there are some organizations who are already, they are sustained, and also they are focusing on the rural people and trying to reduce the poverty, and also trying to empower the women in terms of economic, political, and social. Because I think that as she mentioned earlier, that poverty, the term, the poverty and the poor, it's very complicated because you can't measure only in terms of economy, because it's multi-dimensional aspect. So even if we consider about the empowerment, we have to do from multi-dimensional approaches. So I think there are many organizations basically they are microfinance based. Although now they have different kind of activities, they have just introduced other things, but still microfinance organizations, they are very dominant and they have been working for last 30 years or 40 years. And like Indonesia, I can say that they have already reduced the poverty in Bangladesh. But what I said, at least they have reached to the rural people and they are trying, to improve the situation and the condition of the people. So it's emerging. I mean, I should say that evolving and also the emerging in Bangladesh. Even the government, earlier the government also had some kind of government-run cooperative system. But so somehow government are also, involved with some sort of social business earlier, but they never recognize themselves as that. Rather, what she say, ask the challenges that they are facing. Yes, when you said that you are an NGO, it's okay for the government. But when you mention that you are involved with social business, social enterprises, then they, become very, scared what they are actually doing. And also the other problem that sometimes you say that yes, of course, most of the problem or the challenges are, common for everybody. But I was just thinking about the recent incident that happened with Professor Yunus. Yes, sometimes the government also, think or consider personally, like the Professor Yunus, whatever he's doing, I may agree with him or not, but the person has become, more important to the, or a threat for the country. So it's also one kind of challenges that we also face.
Before, may I just throw in a couple of clarifications? Just focusing on these two issues of impact and sustainability. First, on the issue of impact, just to clarify, the research, when you cite the impacts, they were impacts as perceived by your respondents who are heads or people in the SEs themselves, right? And were there also questions directed at the target groups also? So, and second is that these are essentially, you mentioned purposive, limited interviews, right? So I'm raising that because I think it's important to appreciate the limitations of research and the extent to which we draw conclusions about the impact that we draw, that it is limited to the methodology. Yeah.
I would like to answer the question because from the very beginning I was scared about the research because I also shared with Lisa earlier that we just interviewed the SE and the management. So if you really, really want to look at whether these programs are actually working and, reducing the poverty, you have to go to the so-called target group or the beneficiaries. But the limitations of this research is that we didn't do that. And as an anthropologist, definitely I have this kind of, feelings that we have to look and we have to, hear the voices of the local people and the target people. Otherwise, you can say we can't conclude. So it's just the beginning, according to Lisa, that it's the beginning of the research, and later on we will go to the local people, and then we will, look at what is happening. Because I did my research on basically microfinance and especially the Grameen Bank and others. So I can say, and what I am, I have added in this research, that's basically from my previous research, I incorporated the local voices, nothing else. Thank you.
Yeah. And then just a follow-up clarification. On the question of sustainability is asked from the point of view of the definition of social enterprise. This is a question I told you. So when you say a social enterprise is sustainable, are we basically saying that it is able to sustain itself primarily from the profits or surplus that it is able to make from the delivery of goods and services? Because if that is a definition, then the issue of sustainability of BRAC or the other organizations may have to be taken, to qualify, because many of these NGOs are sustainable not purely from the surplus of the operations, but a lot from the grants and donations. But they're sustainable. That's another means, you can describe it as social impact. So I'm just saying in terms of the clarification of the thoughts.
Sorry, we have a definition that the majority of the income has to come from trade to be sustainable. That's the definition that we use. The majority of the income, the turnover, the whole of the organisation.
Okay. So it has to be primarily from the
trade.
From the more.
Yeah, from whether it's trading in services or goods or.
Okay.
In terms of sustainability, so definitely BRAC, Grameen Bank is the big or giant organization in Bangladesh. We can give put this example. because we are working with small enterprises in the rural area. And definitely we are facing a lot of challenges in terms of sustainability for the small enterprises. Because of we have some limitations in terms of technical capacity, in terms of management capacity, in terms of social problem, in terms of policy issues, a lot of challenges we are facing. But we can't give the example like, BRAC or, Grameen Bank. So there are giant organizations in Bangladesh. They have huge wealth and resources.
Can I just add something just for 1 minute? Yes, definitely. As I mentioned earlier, that only 5%, less than 5%, they think that they are student, and the 95% they don't.
Yes.
They are just evolving, emerging. Yes, definitely a small organization. They are facing lots of problems, but still they are, fighting.
Yeah.
So definitely there are examples of banks, and also there are many examples who are, just emerging.
Okay, I think just the identity of what is a SEP or what is an SEU, if you're an NGO, if you're a worker or a supplier. I think part of that is precisely because you're changing from being a worker to being a stakeholder in the enterprise. So once the worker says, I'm a supplier, he's an entrepreneur. That's, for me, I come from the Philippines, I run a business, so I know that changes. Once they start thinking of themselves as suppliers and not as workers, then they have a stake in the business. Similar to the NGO, the ones that starts it. If they still consider themselves an NGO, they're still not. They're still not into all the risks and all the stupidities that come when you're running a business. And I think that's also part of the transformation that will take place when you start thinking of yourself as an enterprise and not as an NGO trying to do business. I think that is part of the transformation that you will see in the sphere. But the other thing I wanted to ask was also, I raise this only because I think maybe that would be a good question to ask for perception. Are you a worker or a supplier? Are you an NGO or an enterprise? And when you see that transformation in the response taking place, then you'll see there's some progress as far as the social enterprise sector is concerned. Secondly, it has to do with the role of women. I was struck by the comment that women have to, it's very hard for women to go out in Bangladesh without being, So does being engaged in a social enterprise, does that change does it redefine the place of women in the community, not necessarily in the whole Bangladesh society, but at least in the community? And then have you, or is your research, or could your research look into where specifically do women make a difference? Some stories in the Philippines where sometimes it's when the cooperative is in trouble, then a woman comes in and turns it around. And when a woman leader comes in, turns it around, then it becomes successful. Sometimes you hear those kinds of stories, and in some other cases, having cash, having money changes your status, even at home or possibly in the community. So, and then does the enterprise redefine the space that women can move around in the community as a result of participating in the business?
Yes, please.
I'm Mojaharul. Very good presentation. Extreme weather disturbance, about 17% in your country. And we in Bangladesh is working different job areas, and they have some climatic shocks over the years sometimes. There could be a very good social enterprise with a structure, with skilled people, overcoming some barrier, political, it could be policy level, could be social. It could be a well-run social enterprise, but suddenly natural shocks make it damaged by 100%. So how could the SEs plan better to reduce these kinds of natural shocks?
In the context of calamities and
Yes, I'm telling you.
So the question is related to how to deal essentially with
Yes.
particularly if you are a social enterprise, such as issues.
Yeah, for the survey in Indonesia, it's about 1/3 suffered by extreme weather disturbance. It's 17%, 16 out of 59 is suffered by weather disturbance. That's extreme. So how could they plan it better, to reduce these kinds of shocks?
Maybe Oxfam will find it in the next one.
You see, in
No, but it's a good question,
Philippines,
yes.
last year there was a hail,
Yes.
and in 1 hour, washed out everything, even life. Look, there is nothing.
That's why I told that especially in Bangladesh case, who based on agriculture and raw materials, they are facing.
Think about not only Bangladesh, we are talking about the Philippines, we are
Yes,
talking
yes,
about
the
Indonesia,
world,
we are talking about the Bangladesh. The three countries, we have the experience of
Yes.
climate shocks.
I think her
So the
point
climate
is just an
change as
important
social
point.
enterprise could be a research topic.
Except whether the methodology and the depth of the interviews allowed them to focus particularly on the topic. I think both seem to be saying that it's important, but our research process and probing did not allow you to go into much detail in that aspect. So I think that's what I'm getting from that. Yes.
Two things on the question about like the shocks and stresses. There is actually a workshop group that will tackle that on building resilient livelihoods and sustainable social enterprises. So I think it would be good to input in that session. Second is, I am Jo from Oxfam. Sorry. And I specifically looked at women economic leadership as part of my role. And so my interest in this research, considering the limitations of the methodology, because we just limited into survey. But I'm particularly interested to probe further into the findings and conclusion about women's economic empowerment. Because I think most of you for both Indonesia and Bangladesh talk about women's inclusion. Somehow there's participation, they would be in management position, etc. But beyond that, even beyond income, generating income from it. So I would actually further ask what kind of income is this? Is this an income that is enough for women to gain social recognition? Or is it an income that would actually lift the women and their families out of poverty? So what kind of income does social enterprises really generate for the poor and for women especially? And then the other aspect as well is in terms of, I'm really looking at the transformational aspect. And I think I think maybe because of the limitations of methodology, and then so we just kind of reduced into just providing description, but not even the data that we had is really limited for us to probe further. But there are beyond the economic, income, when we look at women's economic empowerment, it's actually also looking at how are their participation or their leadership also transforming gender-based inequalities in the market at the household level, because that is also important. It's really also about whether, so what my interest really here is that whether are we able to identify different barriers for women's economic empowerment within the SE sector, and what would be opportunities, which for me, these are important when we actually identify our agenda for women in post-2050.
Says something. Definitely women have been able to change their previous, their economic condition from previous to recently they have been able to change. They are getting some sort of bargaining power with their, that they can use within the household and also within the society, especially when they work together as a group. And their social mobility is also increased, although they are constrained. Their attitude towards savings and their children's education, that has also been changed. And also they are buying some sort of asset which they didn't consider earlier. Like if we consider the Amartya Sen's entitlement. So as I mentioned earlier, that they are trying to reduce the capability, discrimination and deprivation, but at the same time, if we consider about the entitlement, it is still beyond that. Women, mostly, especially if we look at the microfinance-based, business, mostly women, they, borrow the money, but the users are the main. They are using the money, they are doing the business. So still, we have to focus on that, which also created the gender inequality, and also it does the gender inequality produce and reproduce within the society. That's all, and I think that in future when we do research and we go to the the local people, then we will get more information.
I think about this women's role, we cannot ignore the fact that the framework for women in development has been started in 1960s or so, and then gender and development recently, but still we have problems with WID in 2014. I think it hasn't solved since WID era until now. So the problem is it's still the same, but then some of the women in our survey, they mentioned about education as the highest impact of what they're doing with the income generating from their involvement with the SEs, so they can send children to school. I think that's in the top priority, and then health and education mostly. So the things with the microfinance. Also, I again have to emphasize that this survey is done in Jakarta and greater peri-urban area. If you want to find fair trade organizations, business, social business, you can go out to Bali. You have big SEs there has chocolate factory. Yeah, chocolate. You would be interested. And it's huge, profitable. They have hundreds of workers, but in Sulawesi as well, and in Kalimantan, with big revolving fund social enterprises. So this, because most of our samples are microfinance institutions, we can say that income generating, that is the top impact. Although it's also started when this survey started, I think Lisa would recall that I opposed the questionnaire, didn't ask respondents, the poor people, directly about what they perceive about impact. So that's the limitation of the research instrument that we use we employed for this research. But yeah, I think that because the questions mostly ask closed questions and some open-ended, but not explored really further about the women WERD, also framework for women in economic.
Okay, last question.
SE with working with street children, they receive regularly not projects, orders for products from street children. So they're buyer. They are the buyers for the products of SEs. And some provided avenues for exhibitions, for things like that, but not yet formalized into a mechanism, because it's very depend on the Pertamina, the state-owned oil company, provided the avenues, exhibitions, place, also purchasing the products. But that very much depends on their approach with Pertamina, rather than a rigid mechanism that is established.
Well, allow me to just briefly highlight some of the points in the discussion. Well, I think this is essentially an initial attempt. So it's primarily I see that as an initial attempt at profiling. And some of the key issues immediately, particularly was evident in Bangladesh. Even just this asking, are you an SE, and understanding the whole concept, that in itself is something that needed clarification. Like some would be in it without knowing it. Right? So that's just one whole issue. Okay? And I think within the limits of their research, in terms of the area of at least perceived impact, is explained by the respondents who belong to the organizations, and partly because of the predominance of microfinance institutions in their
in their sample is, of course, that the impact has been in the area of essentially primarily economic empowerment. I think the other point that I picked up with regards to the two presentations is that when you talk about the existing state of SEs, there will be a few very big ones, but quite a huge number, at least in the sample, of very, very small ones. And my pickup again from Indonesia's case is quite a number of them still struggling with their basic business model, right? Not being able even to earn enough to cover their expenses. Okay. I think that the suggestions are all well taken, I think, in terms of gaining overall a better understanding of the roles that social enterprises want to play or can play in the context of social problems and in the context of the failure of both the state and the traditional players, meaning even existing businesses, to be able to address those needs. I think that continues to be a relevant question. Perhaps SE should think about, in a sense, it sharpens their positioning and their reason for being. Okay, and admittedly, I think the research highlights many issues, and a number of us here have very specific interests and concerns, either in the area of impact, for example, women empowerment, or in the area of dealing with specific challenges, such as the context of climate change, of disaster, okay, which certainly are opportunities for further exploration. Okay. And I guess also there, it's an interplay of the regulatory environment. I think that was some of the issues that were raised. Okay. Yeah, I guess, that's essentially my take in terms of the points that were raised. And let me just maybe share a few thoughts going beyond what is defined. I think, and integrating what happened today. I think there are several dimensions, I think, that all of these have been discussed. And one is the whole issue of the goals of the social enterprise. And based on this morning's presentation, it's essentially, again, this is my take, when you say a social enterprise, it's a combination of a social goal and an economic goal. Somewhere in between, you may be more towards social or more towards economic, but certainly a social enterprise needs to have both goals. A second aspect is really the roles of the priority target group of the social enterprise. Again, this may vary. If you're targeting women, if you're targeting the poor, various enterprises may define the roles of these target groups differently, ranging from simply being clients, to being employees, to being managers, to being co-owners, and part of the governance. So again, it can be a continuum. I think, based on my understanding of microfinance institutions, most have just targeted primarily the marginalized groups, the poor, as clients. Okay, but very few. Well, of course, you mentioned Grameen. They have women on the board, but again, you raise issues of positionally, yes, but in terms of effective capacity to function as board members, that continues to remain a challenge. Then the third is that, at least based on their review, and I think it is also because of the nature of microfinance, that there is a predominance of microfinance institutions. To me, it's because the business model for microfinance is pretty cut and dry. You lend money, you charge an interest, and, well, the reality is the interest is fairly high, substantially enough to cover a lot of your costs, right? But I think the challenges for the business models of the other fields, health, water, recycling, etc., particularly when you are operating it or want to deal with the marginalized groups and the context under which they have to operate, raises very important business model challenges. Okay, so microfinance is a far bit ahead, at least as far as sustainability is concerned, but of the types where the role of the target group has primarily been that of client rather than owner, with the exception of the cooperative model, which again, I think in Bangladesh does not seem to have taken off as much. Okay? Then really the issue is, dimension is, when we say social enterprise, the extent, the role of the target group in governance and ownership, I mentioned that. Okay? And I already mentioned also another key challenge, defining the service delivery and sustainability model, okay, particularly for the non-building types. Okay. Financial sources was, I think, part of the intention because there was a profiling of the sources of equity. Okay. Yeah. So I think I'm just saying that these are different ways with which we can look at social enterprises and begin to hang some of both the challenges and the opportunities that surround it. Okay. And lastly, just from my point of view, given again, and I guess it's the academic part of the show, given again the limitations of their methodology, I think we take the conclusions and impact as indicative, and that these are impacts as perceived and explained by the respondents of a very purposive sample. And I would caution, even in the field of microfinance, some of you who are in this, right, there have been attempts at reviewing a whole history. Several authors have done history reviews of various impact studies globally of microfinance. And truth to tell, their conclusions seem to be that, well, there are micro-studies with impacts here and there, both positive and negative. But the jury on microfinance is out yet, particularly when you talk about impact in the sense of, well, again, I should not generalize, but impacts remain a subject for further clarification. I think it is the same challenge that face the social enterprise sector at this stage, okay? Which me personally, maybe at this stage, my own bias is, let's focus on the doing first, because we need to proliferate more and then worry about the impacts later. Because doing the impact studies in a very robust way will require substantial, could require substantial investments. You begin to move into randomized controlled trials. Anyway, that's just my... Okay, so sorry for keeping you from lunch. What's the timetable now
Lunch
until?
is served.
Yeah, until.
Lunch is almost gone.
So when do we get together?
1:30.
12:30. Okay.
12:30 to 1:30.
Yeah,
And then
okay.
be back at the plenary